following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
This is Lawrence Spivak inviting you to meet the press with the Vice President of the United States.
Meet the Press, America's press conference of the air and the world's oldest network television program, is a public affairs presentation of NBC News. Meet the Press is brought to you by all state insurance companies. For insurance to protect your car, your home, your life, health, and business, too. Talk to the good hands people.
Allstate believes airbags will save lives. So we bought 200 special fleet cars equipped with airbags for Allstate people to drive and test. This is one of them. The airbag's right inside there. It's designed to inflate, prevent injury, and deflate in half a second. But only in a serious frontal crash, not a little bump. Look, at 5 miles per hour. The airbag doesn't inflate. The brain of the system is a sensing device that uses technology from the space program. Now, a similarly equipped car heads into the wall at 17 miles an hour, a speed which could cause injury. Watch again in slow motion. Allstate's airbag-equipped fleet cars will help determine the reliability of this system. Allstate says, let's use space-age technology to reduce auto injuries and save lives.
Our guest today on Meet the Press is the Vice President, Gerald R. Ford, the first Vice President in history to be nominated by a President and confirmed by Congress. Mr. Ford served 25 years in the House of Representatives, the last 9 as Republican leader. We'll have the first questions now from Tom Brokaw of NBC News.
Mr. Vice President, did you agree with President Nixon's decision not to release presidential documents to the Senate Watergate Committee to reject the subpoena?
It seems to me, Mr. Brokaw, that this is a decision that requires a great deal of thought, and I'm sure the thought was given to it by the White House. I happen to agree because the President has cooperated with Judge Sirica. The President has cooperated with Mr. Jaworski, the special prosecutor. The President did make a good faith effort to work out an arrangement with the Urban Committee. And it seems to me that this final decision by the committee to demand some 500 documents is a scattergun approach, is an approach that is best described, I think, by the new Attorney General as a fishing expedition. Although I was not in on the final decision by the White House, I do agree with the determination.
But in this environment, don't you think the President and the country might have been better served by trying to reach a compromise with the committee instead of setting the stage for still another legal confrontation?
It seems to me, Mr. Brokaw, that the action by the committee, which was so sweeping and doesn't appear to have any relevance to the committee's legislative ambitions or objectives, that the President was right in saying under these circumstances such a broad sweep, such a fishing expedition was not a proper way to get to the truth. And I hope and trust that as we go down the road, perhaps there can be some compromise. But a 500 document demand is far too broad, far too much of a fishing expedition.
But the question, Mr. Vice President, was about the possibility of a compromise, and President Nixon apparently closed the door on that possibility. Do you think that that was wise?
At this point, I think with the broad sweeping demand by the committee, the President was right in saying that he would not go along with their demand. Now, if they are willing to make some refinements in the demand, cutting it down to things that are more relevant to the committee's responsibilities, then I think there may be, and I underline may be, an area of compromise.
Would that be your advice to the President?
I would like to study the total demand of the committee first, and it seems to me that if there is such a refinement, it is within the realm of possibility.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll be back to introduce our other panel members and continue the questions in just a minute, but first this message.
The Rhine River. Its waters sweep below historic castles, through majestic gorges, and past an oil refinery run by an Exxon affiliate near Karlsruhe, Germany. The refinery needs 3 million gallons of water a day for cooling and processing. After the water is used, it flows into the Rhine. But before we let it out, it goes through 3 separate cleaning treatments. During the final treatment, special microorganisms attack the remaining pollutants. And only when we're satisfied with the cleanliness of the refinery water do we release it into the Rhine. Around the world, from Singapore to San Francisco, Exxon's refineries face different water treatment problems and different community environmental needs. Wherever the refinery, whatever the needs, Exxon is working to find solutions. Exxon, we'd like you to know.
Now, back to Meet the Press, an unrehearsed press conference. Here's our moderator, Lawrence Spivak.
We're ready now to resume our interview on Meet the Press. Our guest is the Vice President, Gerald R. Ford. You've just met Tom Brokaw of NBC News. The other questioners on our panel today are Clifton Daniel of the New York Times, George F. Will of the National Review, and David S. Broder of the Washington Post. We'll continue the questions now with Mr. Daniel.
Mr. Vice President, in the hearings on your confirmation to be Vice President, you seem to agree with the position that's been taken by Senator Ervin on the point raised a moment ago by Mr. Brokaw, that the concealment of evidence is evidence of wrongdoing is not allowed by the Constitution. Have you changed your position on that?
I don't think so. If I recollect accurately what I said in either the House or the Senate committee hearings involving my confirmation, I said any evidence that involved a criminal action ought to be made available by the White House. Now, I haven't had an opportunity personally to study all of the documents, some 500, that the Urban Committee has requested. I can't believe that all of those documents involve alleged criminal activity by any person involved at the White House. It does seem to me that when you bear in mind the cooperation that the President has shown with Judge Sirica, the compromises that he's made with the special prosecutor, and the good faith evidence that the good faith effort, I should say, that he made with the Urban Committee at the outset of this heightened controversy, does permit some refinement if there is a reasonable area where any criminal involvement is concerned.
Mr. Vice President, a new poll just published today indicates that 79% of the people may believe that one or more of the serious charges made against President Nixon is true. Is the public mistaken in that belief?
I really can't answer that because I'm not a person that has an insight to every individual who was interrogated by the poll. I was also interested, however, that 45% of the people indicated they were against any impeachment action by the Congress. So somewhere in between, it seems to me, the American people may have some lack of full faith in every actions by the President, but on the other hand, they are not in favor, at least the majority are not in favor, of the impeachment action that is contemplated by some in the House of Representatives.
Apparently they thought that impeachment would be too disruptive. But those who were questioned in the poll seem to be most concerned about the withholding of information, official secrecy. You've long been an advocate of openness in government. Do you share the public's concern about secrecy?
Well, I am concerned, and I have so expressed my desire that the White House not only initiate, but also expand its Operation Candor. I did favor the President going out to meet the people as he did prior to the Christmas holidays. I was very much in favor of the President disclosing his income tax returns as well as his financial situation. And I hope and trust, despite what I understand is some reluctance at the present time, that the President continue with Operation Candor, with a full disclosure or a white paper involving the ITT matter and the so-called milk fund contributions.
Mr. Will.
Mr. Vice President, have you heard any of the Watergate tapes?
I have not, sir.
Would you like to?
Well, I would just as soon get a written summary or an honest appraisal by an objective person. I don't think it's essential for me to sit and listen to the tapes. I would think it just as wise or just as helpful if I had a summary put together by an objective group of individuals.
Mr. Vice President, when Operation Candor began, Mr. Nixon was below 30% in the approval rating. Today, he's still below 30%. Why did Operation Candor fail?
In the first place, it hasn't been concluded. I think there are some other things that can and should be done, as I mentioned a moment ago. It seems to me that they ought to release these white papers involving IT&T allegations. I'm convinced that the President is absolutely free and clear of any wrongful actions as far as ITT is concerned. I'm absolutely certain, Mr. Will, that the President was acting properly and practically at the time of the increase in the parity price for milk because some 130 members of the House and I think 28 members of the Senate were demanding that the parity price be increased far greater than what the President proposed. I think the White House ought to get these documents out and make them available to the public. I think it will increase public support for his position above that at the present time.
Mr. Broder.
Mr. Vice President, I'm surprised at what you're saying about Operation Candor because official White House spokesmen have been clearly indicating for the last week that that is a closed book. Do you have some reason to think that that decision is still open?
I'm simply saying, Mr. Broder, that in my opinion, the course of action which was initiated a month or so ago, which I think was a wise one, ought to be continued, and I hope it is.
Have you been consulted on this question of whether they're going to continue or shut down Operation Candor?
I have not for the last week or so.
What would you say the reaction among the Republican members of Congress would be if, as the White House spokesman suggests, Operation Candor is finished?
I think most Republican members of the Congress will react somewhat like myself. They believe the President should do those things that he initiated sometime early in December, as I recall the date. And I think they were beneficial. And it's my judgment that comparable actions along this line will be helpful in the future.
Could I ask you a general question that goes to your role? You have suggested now a course of action on disclosure of these documents. You suggested earlier to Mr. Brokaw that there may be an area of compromise possible on the question of the subpoenaed documents. Are you in the kind of contact with the President or his lawyers that allow us to take you as a sort of a spokesman for the President on these questions?
In the last 2 weeks while I've been on a family vacation, I have talked to the President 5 or 6 times, personally by telephone. We have not discussed this particular issue in any depth. I do have my own firm convictions, which I think have been indicated in the past, and I reiterate them now. It seems to me that the President ought to maximize his effort to reestablish the good rapport that he had with the American people, and Operation Candor is one way of doing it. I add, however, that in the long run, as well as perhaps in the short haul, the President, by concentrating on the solution of problems, the energy crisis, the Middle East controversy, and other matters of real substance, will increase his personal support by the American people even more quickly and more importantly than by Operation Candor.
Mr. Vice President, may I ask you one more question on Watergate? In a recent U.S. News interview, you said, and I quote you, "I'm positive the President is innocent of any involvement in Watergate," end of quote. Can you tell us why you're positive? Have you seen evidence that the rest haven't seen?
I haven't seen concrete evidence, but I have talked to the President about it, and I've been in many meetings where it was discussed by the President and with others. And I'm absolutely certain that if you go back and reflect on the circumstances in 1972, here the President had just come back from China, a historic action on the part of our government. The President was in the process of negotiating with the Soviet Union. The President was trying to end the war in Vietnam. I'm sure he turned to those running the re-election campaign and said, I have these major matters that involve the national security and the well-being of the American people, and you run the campaign. Unfortunately, those that ran, some of them apparently ran it badly. But I'm convinced that the President was preoccupied with these very important matters, and therefore I'm convinced he had nothing whatsoever to do with Watergate.
May I take you away from Watergate and take you to the energy crisis, which is the other more serious problem the country faces? Secretary of State Kissinger announced the other day that the President will make a personal effort to persuade major oil-producing and oil-consuming nations to get together to ease the energy crisis. Do you know what he has in mind? Has he in mind a summit meeting of those nations?
I would imagine that something of that sort would materialize if there is the cooperation both by the producers and the consumers. But I have not seen the final plans, and I doubt, as at this moment, there is any organizational structure or finalization of those plans. But it does seem to me that neither the producing nations nor the consuming nations are anxious to have an energy problem create an economic depression throughout the world. And therefore, it's in the best interest of both the producers and the consumers to sit down and find an answer. But of course, this answer may have to come with some solution of the problems in the Middle East.
Mr. Brokaw.
Mr. Vice President, I'm curious, as was Mr. Broder, about your relationship with the President. You have just now indicated that you don't know the final plans or much of the planning for the President's new initiatives on energy. You indicated a moment ago that the President did not ask you specifically about his plans for Watergate defense. Does he ask you for your advice, or does he just keep you posted on what he's doing when you have those telephone conversations?
Well, prior to going on a family vacation, I was in daily contact with the President, either attending meetings where he started out as the chairman and I took over as the chairman when he had to go to some other responsibility. I talked to him on the phone. We had a good two-way responsibility, and I'm sure that that fine responsibility or relationship, I should say, will continue once the President is back from San Clemente and I'm here in preparation for the resumption of the Congress.
Mr. Daniel.
Mr. Vice President, you said a moment ago that some in the House of Representatives wanted to impeach the President. You've spent 25 years in the House, 9 of them as minority leader. You must be pretty good at counting noses up there. Do you think the Judiciary Committee in the House will vote to impeach the President?
I don't think the committee will, based on the evidence that is currently available under the definition of impeachment under the Constitution. The Constitution says in the case of a president may be impeached for treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. In my judgment, Mr. Daniel, there is no current evidence that I'm familiar with that falls within the definition of impeachment under the Constitution. Therefore, I don't believe that a majority of the members of the House Committee on Judiciary, Democrats and Republicans, will vote an impeachment resolution. Now, if it becomes a partisan issue, it might. But on the basis of substantive evidence, there is no likelihood, in my opinion, of any such action by the House Committee on the Judiciary.
But when you, excuse me, but when you were seeking the impeachment of Justice Douglas, you said that grounds for impeachment were what the House said they should be. Is that not the case with the President?
I think that's true, but I think one should quickly point out that the definition for impeachment for a federal judge is different than the definition of an impeachment for the President. A federal judge is appointed during good behavior, and there's no further definition in the Constitution. So good behavior is pretty much what the Congress decides. But the definition for impeachment of a president is very specific. And I don't think that a majority of the members of the House, or even of that committee, unless it becomes a purely partisan issue, will find any evidence for the impeachment of a president that falls within the specific definition under the Constitution.
Mr. Will.
Mr. Vice President, a recent poll of the American people concerning the 1976 election showed you beating the two principal Democratic candidates, Senators Kennedy and Jackson. Do you agree with the American people that you're presidential material?
Well, let me put it this way, Mr. Will. I saw that poll, and I guess I'm human, and I was pleased, but as I reflected on it, I hope it meant that the American people, in the short time that I've had this job, thought I'd been handling my responsibilities constructively in all the ways that I could. I don't want that poll to change my point of view that I've repeated many, many times, that I have no intention of being a candidate in 1976.
Well, that is your current intention, but if you continue to lead the polls, would you deny the American people their desires?
Well, things fluctuate a good bit, Mr. Will, and I honestly believe that I can do a far better job by telling you and telling the others in this panel and those who might be watching that I should not be a candidate.
Does that mean you won't campaign in 1974 for Republicans?
No, not at all. I'll handle my responsibilities as a vice president for the Republicans just as my predecessors have, just as Hubert Humphrey did, just as Vice President Nixon did in the time when he was vice president to President Eisenhower. A vice president for a political party does have latitude and a responsibility to campaign for candidates of his particular party. I will do that. But I repeat, I have no intention of being a candidate in 76.
Gentlemen, we have less than 4 minutes. Mr. Broder.
Mr. Vice President, this is the wrap-up time on the budget for next year. Can you say whether the administration now regards the main problem facing the economy as being the threat of renewed inflation or the threat of recession?
I don't believe the administration feels that the main problem is a recession. Even with the oil problem or the energy crisis, the predictions are not dire, they're not serious as to the economy. You get some mixed views on this, but even with the current energy problem, I think you'll have growth in the economy. You may have some slight increase in unemployment, but as you look at the broad economic circumstances of this country, we're in pretty good shape. Now, the administration does have standby programs to meet any of these contingencies that might develop that would indicate some economic problems. There are plans, I should say, to increase our public service employment in those selected areas where the energy crisis may have hit the hardest. There are other plans to help meet individual economic crises. And so I think that we're looking down the road at a pretty good year in 1974, one that is not as bad as some of the prophets of doom forecast, not as good as some of the oracles who think we're going real well. But the administration has contingency plans either way.
A voter down in Tennessee that I interviewed yesterday asked me to ask you this question. She wants to know how much of the present inflation, in your judgment, is the result of past government decisions interfering with the operations of the free economy. Things like price controls and all these various allocation schemes and so on.
I would hesitate to make a definitive answer to that. I think some of our budgetary problems over the last 10 years have contributed to the current inflation. I think there are other policies of the federal government that have contributed to some of the shortages. So the government is to some extent responsible, and by the government I mean the Congress and the White House. I hope that in the next session we can find some better answers working together.
Mr. Vice President, last year Congress adjourned without passing the energy bill because of the controversy over taxing windfall profits by oil companies. How important do you think it is for them to pass an energy bill quickly?
I think it's mandatory that they pass at least 2 energy bills, one giving to the new energy czar, Mr. Simon, ample authority to meet these various problems. Number 2, there should be an energy research program, at least what the President has proposed, a $10 billion program over a 5-year period, maybe more so. And if the Congress acts quickly on these 2 measures, I think we can be well on our way to self-sufficiency in the energy field.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but our time is up. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for being with us today on Meet the Press. I'll tell you about next week's guest in just a minute after this message.
Recently, the airbag got its first real-life trial on a Los Angeles freeway. This film was taken moments after the crash. I'm happy to report the airbag completely prevented injury to the front seat passenger. I'm Ed Reimers for Allstate. This is the car involved in the crash, one of hundreds of similar cars the U.S. government is now using for on-road testing of airbags. The damage? Over $1,000. And this is the man involved, Howard K. Schaefer. No injuries, Howard?
No, I seem to be all right, Ed.
Do you have any idea of what would have happened to you if you hadn't had the airbag?
I think I would have gone into the windshield.
Now, you wear glasses, Howard. Was there any injury or problem from the airbag?
I noticed a smudge on my glasses, but my glasses didn't even come off.
The airbag. Everyday experience on the road is helping to determine its reliability in saving lives and preventing serious injuries. Ed Reimers reporting for Allstate.
For a printed copy of today's interview, send 10 cents in coin and a stamped, self-addressed envelope to Merkel Press, Box 2111, Washington, D.C. 20013.
Next Sunday on Meet the Press, our guest will be Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona. Now, this is Lawrence Spivak saying goodbye for the Vice President and Meet the Press.
Today's edition of Meet the Press was brought to you by Allstate Insurance Companies. For insurance to protect your car, your home, your life, health, and business, too. Talk to the Good Hands people. Wednesday morning, the Today Show welcomes William F. Buckley, Jr. and J. Kenneth Galbraith, who will discuss events of 1973 and prospects for 1974. Also on Wednesday's program, Federal Energy Administrator William E. Simon will make his weekly appearance to talk about the current energy situation. Tune in today, every weekday morning, right here on NBC. This is Lee Dayton speaking. Meet the Press has been a public affairs presentation of NBC News and has come to you live from our studios in Washington, D.C.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.